This is Top of Mind, the Dr. Patrick Slowinski Show.
Welcome back to another episode of Top of Mind. We're officially full speed ahead on social media, YouTube, LinkedIn, Spotify, Telegram, so if you're not already following us, now it's the time. Today we've got a very special episode lined up. Dr. Slowinski is here in our virtual studio and we'll be introducing a truly fascinating guest.
Thank you, Victor. I really appreciate it. It's my honor to welcome to the show retired Marine Major General Jason Bohm, who also has the great blessing in my mind, and I know that he would agree, of being the Dean of the Helms School of Government there at Liberty University. So Jason and I are colleagues in a sense. I'm an adjunct professor of psychology. Jason is working hard there at Liberty University, a university that's very close to both of our hearts. And so we have been writing back and forth about all sorts of things. And Jason, thank you for coming on the show. I want to tell our audience a little bit about you. You have a really impressive background, your service in the Marine Corps for over 30 years. Did so many different things in terms of his service to our country in the Marine Corps. To get 2 stars is quite an accomplishment, and we appreciate your service. I think instead of going through the list of all the wonderful things that he did in his military service, we're going to ask him a little bit about that tonight, and he can stress some of those. But you're welcome to see his full bio on Liberty University's website, and also we will post it as well on our website. But as a general officer, or what we call flag officer, he had the opportunity to do many different things, and I'll just give you a little flavor. So commanding general in the Marine Corps Training Command, chief of staff, Naval Striking and Support Forces, NATO, commanding general, Marine Corps Recruiting Command, and inspector general of the Marine Corps, which is a really fascinating position to have, to go and make sure that the taxpayer money and regulations and everything that needs to be done correctly is done correctly. So we appreciate
that.
But
it doesn't always bring you a lot of friends, though, Dr.
It
Slowinski.
sure doesn't. It's lonely at the top sometimes, and that's how it is. And I brought you on the show in particular so that we could talk about one of our favorite subjects, and that's bringing God back into our lives and our discussions and our activities. And so with that, could you just tell us a little bit about you're a retired Marine general, 2 stars in the Marine Corps, and now you're dean of this incredible School of Government, which also hosts the International Relations Department, which is my favorite part. What attracted you first to military service? And you did over 30 years of military service, and your career as a flag officer eventually. Could you just tell us about that experience of what got you into military service and what kept you there for over 3 decades?
Absolutely. And thank you, Victor, and thank you, Dr. Slowinski, for having me on the show this evening. It really is my honor to do so, and I appreciate everything that both of you do to get the good word out. So very simply, my journey to joining the military started when I was in 3rd grade. And in fact, I would used to go to my school library, and I would go to the oversized book section, and there was a book by the American Heritage Foundation on the American Civil War. And that book just fascinated me as a young man. That first piqued my interest in the military. But then the first book I pulled off the bookshelf and read cover to cover was a book called 30 Seconds Over Tokyo. And it was about the Jimmy Doolittle raid on the bombing of Tokyo right after the bombing of Pearl Harbor, where the United States suddenly and unexpectedly found itself thrust into a war it was not prepared for. And President Roosevelt had to demonstrate leadership by refocusing the country on what was most important, and that is preparing them for this long struggle that he knew that we were getting ready to partake of. But he also had to change the entire institutional culture of the United States and bring back people's trust and confidence in all things American. And so he devised this plan with Army medium bombers flying off of naval aircraft carriers to bomb Tokyo, and also let our adversaries know that we may be down, but we're not down for long. If you take us on, you can stand by, because we're going to be coming back, and we're going to be coming back fast and furious. So that piqued my interest in the Pacific theater of World War II. And of course, who was romping and stomping across the Pacific in World War II but United States Marines. And that's where I really gained an appreciation for how important selfless service to others is in fighting for our freedoms and maintaining our liberties that were hard fought and hard won over the years, both from a Christian point of view, but also from a patriotic point of view. So that was really the initial interest that I had in the military. And then I was also very attracted to the discipline, the standards, the brotherhood. You know, the Marine Corps' motto is Semper Fidelis. That's Latin for always faithful. And that's faithful to God first and foremost, to our country, and to our Corps. And when we say to our Corps, we mean to each other. And so it's very much based on biblical worldview, if you will, but done in a very practical way, because not everyone that joins the Marine Corps comes with a religious or a background of faith. And in fact, I was not raised in a church. My parents got divorced when I was young. My mom worked, she put bread on the table, and she was looking to rest on the weekends. But I knew something was missing in my life. And so part of my life journey was being able to find that nexus of faithful service in the military, but also combine it with a growing faith in God and understanding what that meant to me. So the Marine Corps was able to bring those two things together for me under that motto of Semper Fidelis. And I had no aspirations of being a general officer. All I wanted to do was be a Marine and lead Marines. And I was given certain talents by God over time and certain opportunities that allowed me to grow both in my service and in my faith, and run those two courses parallel. And it's not work when you have a passion for what you do. It truly was a calling in my mind. And I still tell people today, I'm like, I don't know if God put me on this journey of becoming a Marine because he was preparing me for something else. And I'm still open to that. But I just find it very curious that I wound up at Liberty University. And I'll pause there.
Well, that's awesome, Jason. And, you know, I was just thinking about a quote I heard the other day. Be a good person, but don't waste your time trying to prove it. And I think that's something that those who have done military service understand, is that you basically get in there and you're willing to give your life for something greater than you are. And for me, I think I see a big connection between your desire to serve your country and be willing to give up your life for your country, and then to train others to do the same thing. Reminds me a lot of what the Son of God did. And so willingly and so forcefully and so purposefully. And I want to talk to you a little bit about the transition, because you started talking about it. So you're in the Marine Corps, you make it to the rank of Major General. So 2 stars for anyone who doesn't know that. It's a big deal. When I was in Afghanistan, I was with a 1 star for a while. And he told me about the process and everything. He was in the Army. And I tagged along with him as his economic advisor on many of meetings and things. And I remember him telling that, you know, just because you get the fancy titles and you get a star on your shoulder, it doesn't make it any easier. There's still a lot more responsibility, more things to do. So you have all this responsibility, all these people, and then you get this opportunity to, after you finish a wonderful career, to go to Liberty University. And let's be honest, I think people hear Liberty University, and depending on what they know and what they've read, they may have 2 very different ideas of what that university is really like. So how are you doing with the transition to coming out of the military, right, to Liberty University? How's that transition going for you?
Oh, it's gone seamlessly, if I can say it that way, and wonderfully at the same time. So let me just say first about being a general officer. In the Marine Corps, we have a good way of making sure you remain humble. So we go through a process once you are selected for a flag officer rank, where you get an orientation. And one of the first things they say to you is, hey, look, There's 14 of you sitting in this room right now. If you are on a bus and it crashed across the 14th Street Bridge and you all passed away, we could replace you like that. So don't think you're all that, you know. And it's true, because we have over 900 colonels in the Marine Corps, and they're all extremely capable, extremely uh, uh, good valued, honorable people, men and women, who could just as easily replace those who did get the nod and were able to move forward. So the reason I mention that is because that humility helps with that transition. So a lot of people, when they come at the end of a career and they have to choose their next steps, they're not sure what direction to go. And there are several different factors that people weigh when they're looking for what that next stage of life would be. But for me, it was very simple. I wanted to live a life of purpose, which I had been doing. I wanted to live a life of value, and I wanted to live a life where I could continue to be a servant leader. So when I was in the Marine Corps, I had a clear mission. We exist to win our nation's battles. I was living a life of purpose and value, and I got to serve beside men and women of honor and character every day. When I showed up at Liberty University, part of what attracted me to it was we have a very clear mission to train champions for Christ. I have a life of purpose and value. I know what I'm doing is important. And I get to serve beside men and women of honor and character every day. So I tell people, I don't feel like I retired from the Marine Corps as much as I just feel like I've moved on to my next assignment in life. And having that understanding and being able to be blessed with really what God has provided to me, because I never even heard of Liberty University until just a few years ago. I have no doubt in my mind that God placed me there for his will to do his purpose, and using the God-given talents that I've been given to be able to contribute in some small way.
You know, it's funny that you said that, because I felt the same way. I had the opportunity to do a master's degree at an Ivy League school in their extension program. And that was a different type of experience for me. It was really great, but there was no mention of God. And that was really, you could tell, if it wasn't verbally discouraged, you could just feel that that wasn't a place where God was really supposed to be in the discussions. And so I had this real prompting to do something different after I got the master's degree, and it really led me to Liberty. I didn't know much about it. I knew about Reverend Falwell and a lot of respect I have for him, but I didn't really know it until I knew it. And then when I finally got to go on campus and feel the spirit of that campus that's been there, it's a really great place. The other thing I'll say, we get a little controversial on our show sometimes, but that's okay. And I don't think this is controversial. One of the things I found out about Liberty that really attracted me to it was that there's no tenure at Liberty. And there's good reason for that, right? You don't have people who are just untouchable. And I remember the joke that someone told me years ago, and I think it's still apropos, and that is, what's the difference between a professor with tenure and a terrorist? And that you can negotiate with the terrorist. And you know, I found that this not having tenure was a really amazing thing. A lot of people don't look at it that way. And so that really attracted me to it. That instructors were there for the right reasons. They weren't going to be able to build their own little kingdoms, and they needed to actually follow the mission of Liberty University. And if they weren't willing to do that, then they could go somewhere else.
That's
and not every
right.
university can do that, right? I don't know very many universities that don't have a tenure program. So that was one of the things. But I want to get back to a question related to both of our experience at Liberty. And that is, how has God and your faith played a role in some of the biggest decisions you made in your life? And if you could kind of share that with us, I think that would be great for our listeners.
Sure. Well, I will tell you that, you know, it's only through God's grace and mercy that I stand here today, because first and foremost, you know, I've was in an inherently dangerous vocation for several decades, and there were plenty of opportunities for me to meet my maker, and he had his protective hand over me, because and honestly, you know, you hear the term that people will throw out there: anybody who says they're not afraid in combat's lying to you. Well, I can honestly say I was never afraid in combat. And the reason was because I felt very strongly that God had a plan. And if it was my time, it was my time, and I was ready for that. But I never walked in fear moving forward. So that's one of the important things is if you have a faith in God and believe that he's directing your path and you're keeping him first and foremost in your life, and your every word, your every deed is centered towards glorifying him, you can't go wrong. And so I will share with you that's kind of related to the transition question as well is, when you've been in the defense department for as long as I have and in the defense industry, there's a lot of people that are willing to hire you and pay you very high salaries to be able to advocate for them, to be able to help with their sales, their relationships with the government, etc. But that was not important to me. What was important is serving God and trying to glorify him, what I do. I'm not being critical in any way, shape, or form of those who work for defense industry. It's important. We need it. Those are critical billets that exist out there to preserve our national security. We need those people. It just wasn't right for me. And to your point is, I have come to understand that everything that I have, everything that I am, is due to God's glory. And in fact, in my retirement ceremony just over a year ago from the Marine Corps, I made it a point to publicly thank God for everything he's done for me, everything he's provided for me and my family. But then I thanked him more for the challenges that he's placed in my life, because I understood that it was at those times, those fiery trials that I had to go through, that I grew the most, both personally and professionally, that was my opportunity for spiritual growth, and that I was able to take that on as what it was meant to be. And then even more recently, I think that God sent me here to Liberty for two reasons. One, he gave me the talents and the skills and the experience and the knowledge I've been able to gain over the years that I think I'm able to now apply to be able to help Liberty advance its mission. But there's another aspect of that. And I also believe that God sent me here because he understood this was my next stage in my own personal spiritual growth and in a relationship with him. And the Bible tells us, seek and you shall find, ask and you shall receive. But quite frankly, it wasn't until fairly recently where I come to understand that, I've always had this feeling in the back of my mind, well, that's not really true, because I know plenty of people that pray for things, but they don't get them. And I've seen loss and I've seen hurt and I've seen struggles. But what I've come to understand in this next stage of my life in spiritual growth is that, yes, God will provide what you ask for. He will provide you what you seek if you're following his will. And that is the key element of that request. And if you're following God's will, if you're putting him at the forefront of all that you do, you cannot go wrong. And you will have context, you will have understanding, you will gain wisdom, and you will gain great joy and freedom, and I dare say liberty, in understanding what God has done for us and will continue to do for us.
Yeah, Jason, I couldn't agree more. I think it's a wonderful opportunity to have God teach us and guide us. And sometimes as you were discussing that, your experience with God and listening to his voice, sometimes the answer is no.
Exactly.
And that's what's hard for us as human beings, especially ones that are career driven. I mean, whatever job I've done, I always wanted to do the best. That was from my parents. That was from my grandparents, immigrants from Poland. It was for people who worked really hard. And I certainly don't think that's a bad thing. I think you can take it too far and you can forget to serve God and just serve yourself.
Absolutely.
But I think in my life, when I have been down a path that I think is a good path, and then if I'm humble enough to pray and ask God, is this the right road for me at this time? And the answer is no. That's a little hard for some people to take. And the next question I had is, as you're at Liberty and you're looking at these young people, and if anyone's been at Liberty, there's we have about 15,000 or more on campus students.
Yes, 16,200 resident and 125,000 online students.
I've got quite a few of the 125,000.
Yes.
So I don't know. We've never talked about this part, what I actually do. So I only have PhD students who are working on their dissertations. And, that's just a process. You have to, it's really,
Absolutely.
I think for my students, it's helped their patients with me. And then, my patients as well, because everybody works differently, but it's such a great, great place. But how do we bring for these young people that are growing up and maybe they don't go to Liberty or they don't go to a place where it's okay to talk about God or they're introduced to God and what he can do for people in their lives. And, this is not political at all, but I was thinking about, I saw a shirt the other day that said, "Make God Great Again." And, it's based on President Trump's slogan, his campaign slogan that has just been a big part of our culture for the last years, for the last decade. But it's a play on that, "Make God Great Again." And I saw that shirt and I thought that's a great shirt
Mm.
because, but then I asked myself, well, how do we do it? And I thought this gentleman wearing that shirt in front of a lot of people in Northern Virginia, he was doing his part.
Exactly right.
And so I wanted to ask you about that. How do we bring God back into our schools, our communities, our neighborhoods, understanding that some people would be offended by that? But how do we still get that message out without, making people really distrust what we're trying to do?
Yeah, and I think in today's society, in some situations, and certainly in the experience that I had in the Marine Corps, where you could be accused of using your position of authority to force religion on people, you have to take a very nuanced approach in some cases. Now, first of all, I would say that everyone should be unapologetic about their faith. Even in the Marine Corps, where you had to watch how you shared your faith with others, I would remind people that we are assigned a chaplain, and we have a chaplain for a reason. That is to see to the spiritual well being of our men and women in uniform. That's important. That provides resiliency to people that face hardship every day. So the military system is set up in order to provide that for folks. But then out in corporate America, even how do you do that and not creating unhealthy situations for people and maybe causing a rift inside of your organization? Well, I think the answer first and foremost is you have to demonstrate your faith through your personal example. It's through your words, it's through your deeds, it's through the relationships that you create with others. It's about the grace and the mercy that you show to others who may be doing you wrong. But as Jesus said, love thy neighbor and turn the other cheek at times. And that's really hard to do for people, particularly in today's society where there's been so much hate and vile disrespect for others. But by doing that, what that does is that opens doors because others see something inside of you that others seek. And that opens up an opportunity for them to say, how do you do it? How can you put up with that? Or that rude person, or the boss doing that to you, or you being laid off, or whatever the situation may be. And that is your opportunity to talk about the love and the mercy and the grace and the goodness of Jesus Christ and God. And that's what I found over the years is everybody has challenges in life, and that too opens up the door for you to be able to speak to people about faith and what it means to put your life into someone else's hands, to surrender all to a loving God who is there for you and will not forsake you and will not put you in any situation that he does not believe that you can overcome, particularly when you're doing it with other believers and when you're doing it with a strong faith in God.
What do you think it is, Jason? And this based on your experience of just being, not only a Marine, but just a father. I don't know if you have any grandchildren.
Six now that I
You have
inherited
six?
fairly recently. Yeah.
Well, congratulations. So you've
Thanks.
seen a lot of people, a lot of different situations. What do you think it is about the life that or the world that we're living in right now that a lot of people are just not interested in God? mean, what do you think it is that this kind of turns people away from the idea of God? And I'm not even just talking about religiosity, because that's a different construct.
Yes,
Belonging to an actual faith and going to church and participating in that community. But I'm
right.
just talking about the idea of believing in something bigger than you. And why do you think so many young people are just kind of turned away by organized religion, or people who represent what they may think is an organized religion?
Sure.
What is it about God and religion that kind of turns people off?
Well, I think the good news is that the majority of the country does believe in God. Now, whether they're practicing in a religion, to your point, is a different story. Even Christians will profess their faith, but aren't practicing and necessarily living a righteous life. The good news is at least we have a foothold, and then we can work from there. And the reason I believe that the majority of the country has a belief in God is because they know how important it is, and it's something they all seek and are searching for. And the reason I think there's others that have either grown away from it or never knew God to begin with is because of the several different factors, the broken families that exist. People, I use my own example. Why I didn't get raised in a church. My mother and father got divorced when I was 7 years old. My mom was a single parent. She worked hard all week, and she wanted to relax on the beach during the weekend. So we went to the beach. But with the commercialization of America, with the loss of personal contact between people as people go to their digital communications now, with I'm purposely trying not to be political here, but with the very liberal views that academia has, generally speaking, and they are the ones that are having a direct influence on our young people growing up in this world, and what they're seeing on social media and what they're seeing in the movies and what they're seeing on TV. All of that has contributed to a situation where people are focused, many people, not the majority of the country, are focused more on their own self and their own well-being and their own value and worth that they derive from themselves and what other people think about them instead of what's truly important. So I think we're trending positive now. I think we are doing away with a lot of the social issues that has dragged us away from a belief in Christ and a belief in God. I think that we're putting mechanisms in place now to be able to help spread the word and do it in a situation where you're not going to be vilified, you're not going to be kicked out of an organization or ostracized for sharing your faith openly. And by doing that and by being that positive example for those around us, I think we'll see a change in direction of the country that was heading down a spiral of evil and ill content in a lot of cases, and entitlement, and we'll start focusing more on each other and what's best for the country, what's best for our communities, and what's best for our families instead of ourselves.
Oh, that's exactly right. And I was thinking as you were discussing that, the disintegration of the family, the nuclear family, as if you will, that where you had a two-parent home, and and maybe you didn't have tons of money, but you had stability. And they did studies in families where truck drivers were the fathers, and other occupations as doctors, and whatever occupation. It could be military, gone a lot from the home, right? For whatever reason, deployment, surgery, a big route that's 1,200 miles, and he's got to take it to pay the bills. And it's interesting that they would compare those moments that they were able to come and spend time with their family, and the effect it had on their children was still extremely positive, because they were still part of the family. They were temporarily gone, but they were there, and it psychologically affected the children in an extremely positive way compared to those who just didn't have a father mostly, or a mother in the home.
Absolutely.
And so that's something that I really love about liberty, is that yes, we don't always get it right as parents or siblings, We just don't always get it right. And sometimes there are problems in families. But man, if you can stick it out and make it work and stay together and be there for each other, children and grandchildren will really benefit from that environment. And I think that's something very destructive that ideologies like socialism and Marxism have done to our younger students, those younger students out there that, they just kind of become nihilist and hedonist, and they just live for themselves. They don't think there's anything bigger than that. I wanted to ask you,
Could
without
I add on
offending,
something there before
please
you
do,
move on to the
Jason.
next question?
Please
Yeah,
do.
so you hit on some very key points, and I think family is extremely important, and family can be defined in several different ways. And what I mean by that is I was always close to my brothers and sisters. And yes, my parents were divorced, but my father came and saw us and spent a weekend with us every month. And a big part of who I am today is from my father and his influence on me, even though he didn't live at home. And then my own experience of being in the military, yes, I was gone a lot. We were at war for decades during my service, and we kept busy overseas. As we like to say, keeping the big bad wolf away from the door. And you had a hand in doing that as well. And I thank you for that service. But what I will say is that when I did come home, and for those truck drivers or other people that have to be away from home, when they come home, they make it a point to make sure the time they have is quality time. Whereas I think some people that are together all the time take that for granted. And we have to guard against that. And so part of that is even though I was deployed away from my family, while I was deployed, I belonged to another family as well. And the family of the Marine Corps, I used to think was the largest family out there. I go back to Semper Fidelis, always faithful to each other. Part of the bond of Marines is the shared hardship that we go through in austere locations and evil situations, and we have to be there for each other. But over time, I've come to realize that the Marine Corps family pales in comparison to the Christian family. And when you can be around a family of believers who are there to backstop you, to be your accountability partner, to be the shoulder to cry on when you need it, or the boot in the butt when you need that as well, that's critically important. That's your family as well. And those people are there to be there to backstop you and support you just as much as your blood relatives are as well. And I think a lot of young people who grew up in broken families, if they can come to realize that, they will find themselves in a better place.
Yeah, and you clearly don't want them to repeat the bad behavior they learned, unfortunately, and suffered with in their own lives if they choose to have children themselves. You want
Yes.
that cycle to
Break the cycle.
continue, to break the cycle. I got to say this, and I'm sure you get this a lot. I think if President Trump were to meet you, he'd say you're right out of central casting. Do you get people that come up to you, and they find and they just know you're a Marine because you kind of have that look about you? And I've been around quite a few Marines in my life as well. And I'm wondering if you could share an experience where a young man or a young woman has come up to you and asked you about a military career, and maybe they weren't completely sold on it yet, and what you were able to share with them and what happened.
Hmm. Well, being the former commanding general of Marine Corps recruiting, I had plenty of opportunity to talk to young men and women about service. And so it would start out with, the way the Marine Corps approaches recruiting works very well for us. And what we do is we call it needs-based selling. And so we don't come to a young man or a young woman and say, hey, we got $50,000 for college. How does that sound? What we do is we start out by saying, hey, Patrick, it's important for me to understand what's important to you. And so in the Marine Corps, in the service of our great nation, we have tangible benefits and we have intangible benefits. Tangible benefits are things like a secure job, paid vacation, medical coverage. And intangibles are things like a sense of belonging and physical fitness and patriotism. So it's important for me to understand what's important for you. And what we do is we have these things called benefit tags where we have 11 of them. They're just a little plastic tag and we etch in 11 different benefits, half of them being tangible, half of them being intangible. And then we say, do me a favor and stack these from most important to least important. And a young man or woman will do that, and they'll stack them up. And then the Marine will place them all in one pile, and he'll point to the top thing, and he'll say, you pick sense of belonging as most important to you. Tell me why. And we'll do that 7 levels of probing to understand what's the need behind the need of this individual that we're dealing with. You know, earlier we were talking about how God doesn't always provide you what you want, but he always provides you what you need. You know, so if we can find the nexus of a need and a want and it meets in the middle, boy, that's a win. So what we do is probe to find out what is the need behind the need of what somebody is saying they want. Because a lot of times they don't know how to articulate that verbally to you, what's inside their heart. And so it's through that probing exercise that we go through that we're really able to understand this individual and then demonstrate to them how the Marine Corps or how the military at large can provide that for them. You know, and the Christian journey is no different. People are out there, and there's a lot of people that have this desire, like I did as a young man. I knew something was missing in my life. I just needed a little direction and guidance to get on track with the plan that God had for me. And that's why this mentorship that people can take on with seniors and juniors or peers or even your seniors that may be lost and looking for a way, a willingness to be able to share that with others, whether it's what you can gain from military service or government service in the State Department or as a Christian. And so the willingness to be open to have that conversation and then really understanding what somebody needs instead of what you want to tell them is critically important.
Thank you so much. You know, I think for our last topic here, I would be remiss if I didn't ask about what you're doing at the Helms School of Government there at Liberty University, because you have as a major there international relations. And I have been blessed to be invited by some of your great faculty several times to come down there and talk to students about a career in the Foreign Service, a career serving as a diplomat, which you know professionally is not the easiest thing either. It takes a certain kind. I mean, we end up having AFN and PCSing just like you all did. And we go through a lot of the same struggles with family and putting them in schools overseas and PCSing. And that means a permanent change of station we're just moving is what it means. You said billet the other in the beginning, and I was going to tell people what that was. That's a career or
job assignment
or an assignment and or a slot. And I just really wanted to get your thoughts on what you're doing there at the Helms School, what you're seeing in terms of our students who are studying international relations in particular for this program, because we have a lot of recovering diplomats that watch this this program. And just give me a sense of how we can get students from different universities across the country, instead of the usual, I will say this very diplomatically, the usual suspect schools, feeder schools, and get a little bit of variety in our foreign service officers or people who are interested. They want to work for the State Department, but maybe they want to have a career overseas in service, or maybe even be a missionary. So what can that degree in international relations there at the Helms School do for young people?
Yeah, absolutely. And so what I'll do is I'll focus on the type of training and education we provide our people to prepare them for a career in international relations, which obviously could be missionary work in its own way. And depending on how you're carrying the word and what your character is, it certainly will be that. And I'll share 2 quick sea stories about how that can play out, one from a military perspective and then one from a diplomatic perspective. So first of all, I think it's important to understand that everything that Liberty University does is based off of the biblical worldview. We ensure that that is the foundation that we have in all the different fields of study that we have. And in fact, we have tools to check ourselves to make sure that we are continuing to instill a biblical worldview in each of our curriculum for all of our different fields of study. For international relations, there's a few key skill sets, as you know better than anyone, that you really need to have. And so first and foremost, what we want people to do in preparing for that is read. Read as much as you can about all the different areas that you're interested in. Read about culture. We want you to experience cultures as much as possible. So we have Fulbright scholarships. We have Bohm scholarships. We're bringing in, for example, for the first time ever, we're going to have a scholar in residence. We have Dr. Hilly Ken from Ariel University from Israel is going to come and be a guest scholar in the Helms School of Government for the fall semester, and she'll bring in her unique skill set and cultural experiences. We deal very closely with the international students. And then we look for immersive training opportunities for our students as well. We have one student in Eastern Europe right now, going to Romania. We have another student working in Ireland, and we have a trip getting ready to go to Paris. We sent a group to Rome this past semester. And we give them immersive training experiences by making them do the practical work that diplomats and government officials do by partnering with government organizations, and the State Department being one of them, in which we tackle complex problems that these government organizations have that they don't have necessary bandwidth to be able to address. They give it to us. We form a interagency team of students, if you will, studying the different areas that pertain to this particular problem. And then they'll deep dive into that problem and come up with viable solutions to solve those challenges that we've been presented to take on over the course of the semester. We then, at the end of the semester, have the students physically go to those locations, and we've done it with the FBI, with state, with NATO, with DIA, with NGIC, the National Ground Intelligence Center, where they will go and they will brief their findings to these organizations to get that real world practical experience of doing the analysis, doing the briefing, interacting with their customers, if you will, to gain that practical experience to then go out and do it for real. So lots of reading, lots of immersive training and education opportunities. And to be clear, although we train champions for Christ, what I was raised in the Marine Corps to understand, and we apply this at the Helms School, is you train for certainty, but you educate for uncertainty, because you are going to face a complex, uncertain world out there in the diplomatic realm, in the military realm, and you have to be prepared to adjust on the fly as a flexible, adaptable problem solver to take on these challenges and come up with viable solutions that provide win-win scenarios for you and those you're engaging with. And so the two examples of how doing this really mattered were both based on relationships. And I do want to share with people that if they are interested in international relations, one of the most important things they can do is to develop their ability to communicate and build relationship with others. And that has to be across languages. It has to be across cultures, because it's relationships that make everything happen in the world. And again, you know this better than anyone. And a small example of how serving in the military can also work as missionary work as well is the fact that while serving in Iraq, there were contracted third country nationals from other countries coming to provide services. And we're talking about cooking, laundry, those types of things for the military and State Department people that were over working with the military to help rebuild the infrastructure of the nations we were working in. And to cut to the chase here, we were able to evangelize to several of these third country nationals that came from Islamic countries, and they converted to Catholicism and were baptized during our deployments. And these individuals found Christ. where they had not known Christ prior to that. So great opportunity to do that, not only for people you're going to engage with internationally, but also inside your own ranks as well. Because as we said, 50 to 60% of marriages end in divorce, and these young people are looking for a way, and they need that coach and mentor to help them get to that point. Another example of this is I had the opportunity while going to the National War College to do an international trip. And in this particular case, I went to Indonesia. And I was interested in Indonesia because it's the largest Islamic state in the world. And a lot of people don't realize that because they think that's all Middle Eastern focused. But during this opportunity, there was a place in Indonesia called Jakarta, which was a hotbed of Islamic fundamentalists. But the mayor who came into that area had really done a great job in clearing that out, in opening up the community and helping the economic development. And the U.S. ambassador was so impressed with this individual and wanted to demonstrate our support for his efforts that he asked our group of students that were traveling to Indonesia to go out and engage with this mayor. And so we were able to do Diplomacy 101 out here and build relationships and bridges with a community that had previously thought of us as being the infidel. And the great experience that I had was when the embassy had approved a tour for us to follow, but the mayor took us off the approved route. And he took us to a mosque. And at that mosque, there must have been 1,000 practitioners in the middle of worship. And there were 500 women on one side and 500 on the other of this huge open air mosque. And the imam was up on the pedestal and he was speaking in Indonesian. I didn't understand what he said. But as we pulled up, it drew everyone's attention to us. And the embassy folks, the diplomats in the audience got a little nervous. And the imam came down off of his parapet there and he was speaking to us and he said, "Would you like to engage the congregation?" And the chaperone that we had with us said, no, I'm not interested in that. But I was the senior student in the group and I said, "I'll do it." And what I was able to do is he brought me up into the middle of the mosque. We perched up there. He had his microphone and he started talking in Indonesian. Again, I didn't understand what he said, but we had everyone's attention. And then he handed me the microphone. And I just went back to what my cultural training had taught me and what I understood about people. I put my hand over my heart and I said, "Assalamu alaikum." And I am not exaggerating. Those 1,000 people were sitting Indian style on the ground, jumped up and cheered. And at that moment, I just shared with them how we're all people of strong faith and belief. And I look for common ground to be able to create a union with these people, a bond with these people who I had never met up to that point. Now, the story isn't to boast my own ego. It's just meant to share how important it is that you form relationships with people, because that will break down several barriers. And that's the type of thing that we try and do at the Helms School of Government, is instill that real world knowledge about how you do this. And we do that by having a very good balance of academics who we need for accreditation purposes and who have extremely high intellects, but maybe haven't been able to do as much in the real world. And practitioners who have done many things in the real world, maybe their academic credentials aren't as high, but it's because they've been learning from the school of hard knocks. And we combine those two into a cohesive team that provides a wonderful experience for all of our students.
Well, listen, Jason, it has been a fascinating discussion with you. God bless you as you continue in your new path that God has put you on over there at Liberty University's Helms School of Government, which does have an international relations department.
Yes, it does.
For anyone listening, I'm a big fan. Thank you for your service again as a retired Marine Major General, and just for your love of God and country. And we hope our listeners really enjoyed this top of mind episode tonight. And Jason, thank you so much. I can't wait to get back over to Liberty and maybe have lunch with you one time.
Absolutely. I look forward to that. And I will extend an open invitation to any of your listeners. If you want to come by the Helms School of Government, I'd be very happy to host you.
Oh, we're looking forward to it. I think I'm going to bring a few in the fall.
All right.
That's the plan. Producer Victor, you want to close us out for today?
Yes, absolutely. And I must say that that was one of my favorite episodes so far. Despite the fact that I was silent behind the scenes, it was so fascinating and incredibly inspirational. Touching on life, military service, Liberty University, I think I'm sold on it. And above all, faith in God. So, General, thank you for sharing your remarkable journey with us.
It really was my honor, and I appreciate both of you and what you do.
Thank you, Victor.
God bless. Semper Fidelis.
In a world full of noise, clarity is power. Stay informed. Stay aware. Stay top of mind.